Yellow fever is an acute viral hemorrhagic disease that is spread by the bite of infected mosquitoes. It is transmitted primarily through the bite of the Aedes or Haemogogus species of mosquitoes. And I chose to present on this topic because when I first read of yellow fever, I didn't know much about the disease or how it was transmitted. And after doing some research, I found out that there is currently a very large outbreak going on in Africa, and I was curious to research and learn more about it. According to the CDC, these mosquitoes acquire the virus by feeding on infected primates and transmitting the virus to other humans or non-human primates. And the transmission is described in these three cycles: the jungle, otherwise known as the sylvatic; the intermediate, otherwise known as the savanna; and the urban. The jungle cycle involves transmission between monkeys and mosquitoes, mosquito species found in tropical rainforests, which typically result in the more sporadic cases of yellow fever. And the intermediate cycle involves transmission between mosquitoes and humans. This occurs most commonly and results in small-scale epidemics, according to the World Health Organization. Outbreaks in this case can reach much higher numbers if the area is more heavily populated with unvaccinated people. And lastly, the urban cycle involves transmission between human and urban mosquitoes, which is, again, the Aedes aegypti. And these lead the urban cycle, and that type of mosquito leads to the large-scale epidemics. For most people, when symptoms do occur with yellow fever, the most common are headache, fever, muscle ache, loss of appetite, and nausea and vomiting. Yellow fever symptoms occur in these three stages: infection, remission, and intoxication. Infection involves the common symptoms of many other illnesses such as fever, flushing, vomiting, headache, muscle ache, and jaundice. And here's just an image giving you a visual of those symptoms. The remission stage is exactly as it sounds. Symptoms go away for most people, and this is the time when they recover. But others who get worse reach the final stage, which is intoxication. And this stage causes problems with vital organs, the heart, liver, kidney, causes bleeding disorders, seizures, coma, and delirium can also occur. The virus is endemic in parts of South America and Sub-Saharan Africa where the climate is warm and damp. And in this image, you can see the countries that are at risk, which are highlighted in blue. And those areas provide the best breeding ground for mosquitoes because of the amounts of rain and the stagnant water that remains with nowhere to drain. And according to numerous sources, the mosquito can actually breed in just a capful of water, so they don't need much space to reproduce. And individuals at risk can reduce their chance of infection by eliminating mosquito breeding sites and avoiding bites of mosquitoes by using repellent that contains DEET, utilizing netted hats, and sleeping in netted housing, and wearing clothing that fully covers their bodies. The people that are at risk within those areas are mainly older adults and unvaccinated travelers or citizens. It is estimated that there are 200,000 cases worldwide annually, and 90% of those occur in Africa. So the avoidance measures are very important to ensure the health and make sure that there's no further spread of the disease, since there's really no way to treat it. There's only a way to prevent it. So a little history about yellow fever. The first outbreaks were actually in the United States in the 1690s, and it was known as American Plague at that time. And later in 1793, the first epidemic occurred in Philadelphia. This was a large-scale epidemic that left 5,000 people dead and left the city in chaos as the government collapsed and authorities evacuated. similar to what happened in times of the plague. And Benjamin Rush, who was actually a physician during the time, studied the symptoms and spread of disease and hoping to uncover the cause. He didn't come to any conclusions, but he favored the miasma theory. So it was interesting to be able to relate what we're learning in class to my research. The outbreak was blamed on the miasma from a shipment of rotting coffee. So they thought that the bad air from the rotted coffee is what caused it, when in actuality, a cold front actually swept through Philadelphia and wiped out the mosquito population. So later, the transmission was finally identified in 1900 by an Army researcher, Jesse Lazier. He studied the theories of Carlos Finlay, and Finlay was actually the first to correctly identify mosquitoes as the vector, but Lazier confirmed his studies and his theories by hatching mosquito eggs and allowing them to feed on patients with yellow fever at a local hospital, and then allowing those mosquitoes to feed on volunteers to see if they became ill, which they did. And eventually these experiments were able to provide a means for a temporary fix. So what they did was began mosquito eradication efforts until there was an emergence of a vaccine to prevent the disease completely. And that didn't happen until 1936 by Max Thieler, who was a Harvard instructor, and he created the vaccine from cultures in embryonated chicken eggs, and it was labeled, the vaccine that he used was labeled 17D, which gives it its name. And his trial results was published a year after he created the vaccine and became the universal standard. And here is an image of them, two of the historical figures and very important people in the disease of yellow fever. And vaccination is probably the most important means of prevention. The World Health Organization has strategies for vaccination in place to protect people in at-risk areas, which include infant vaccination, vaccination campaigns, which I'll touch base on in future slides, and people that are traveling to the area or traveling to those endemic areas are also encouraged to be vaccinated before they go to or travel to an at-risk area to prevent international spread. And the World Health Organization also has entry requirements for vaccination. You must provide documentation showing that you have been vaccinated. And the vaccination is a live virus vaccine. So, and it's recommended for individuals in those areas. Again, I've stated this previously, but it is the most important way to prevent future cases and to minimize the number of people that are being affected. So, being that it's a live virus vaccine, there have been reports of serious side effects, but more often than not, they're very uncommon. The World Health Organization states that the number of adverse events following vaccination are reported at 0.4 and 0.8 per 100,000 people, so very low. The positives outweigh the negatives. So even though it's so easy to say vaccination is the way to prevent it, and it's a good thing, and there are so many health officials out there trying to vaccinate people, the number of people that are unvaccinated is still too high to prevent outbreaks. So the image I'm going to show you just supports that theory in showing you that there's still a large number of people, or a large percentage of cases, but with the mass immunization, it has definitely brought that number down. So what's happening right now in Africa, in Angola, is one of the largest outbreaks in decades. The infected cases has reached about 6,000, and the death toll has reached almost 400 between the areas of Angola and the Democratic Republic of Congo. And so, health organizations, especially WHO, has launched a vaccination campaign, and their goal is to get as many people vaccinated to cease further spread or at least halt the spread. And their first phase is to target the high traffic area between Angola and the Democratic Republic, which here's a map of that area so you can kind of get a visual of the area you're looking at. And so they're targeting 13 million people and offering vaccinations at major points of entry and anywhere you can think of that would offer a vaccine, so clinics, hospitals. And the only issue is they have run into a shortage of the vaccine. They have run out of the regular stock, and they have deplenished the stockpile that they have of 6 million vaccines twice. So right now they're trying to stretch the supplies as much as possible. And according to the Center for Infectious Disease Research and Policy, if need be, they will stretch the regular vaccine to 1/5. And that dosage would still provide immunity for 12 months, whereas the standard provides lifelong immunity. But with such a large population at risk, providing even a year of immunity could potentially stop the outbreak or at least slow the transmission to save hundreds, if not thousands, of lives in Africa. So, in summary, yellow fever is a rapidly spreading virus that is caused by the bite of infected mosquitoes, and it can spread in 3 different cycles, making it a little bit more difficult to halt the spread in those at-risk areas. And a lot of the talk in some of the sources I found was global eradication, which, according to most of the other sites I looked at, just isn't feasible due to the wildlife reservoir in those areas and because of the hot and humid, damp, wet climate, which creates that perfect mosquito breeding ground. So if you take into account all those factors, vaccination is one of the most valuable and most crucial resources that we have in preventing future outbreaks. And with the reemergences of yellow fever in parts of Africa, you can see in history to present day, there continues to be cases that show up or outbreaks that show up. So vaccination should be utilized and highly encouraged to everyone traveling to or living in those areas, as it's our most valuable resource in eliminating the high mortality rate with the disease and preventing future outbreaks. And here's my reference page.